Action. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the American Revolution in plain English. The American Revolution kicks off in 1763 with, surprise, surprise, a war called the French Indian War. It's also known as the 7 Years' War. I don't know why, because it actually lasted for 9 whole years. This war was very costly. The British spent a lot of money to fight the Indians and French. And finally, Britain wins. However, they owe many people lots of money, which leads to the problem of getting the money.
What? The war led to the Stamp Act. It was the first way for the crown to raise money to refill their coffers. The Stamp Act passed a new tax that enforced every piece of paper, every newspaper, marriage license, etc., to carry a British stamp before it could be legal. This made everyone mad, particularly the colonists, the British living in North America. The colonists did not have any representatives in the Parliament, so they had no control over their own laws. This was called taxation without representation. Back in England, only women, slaves, children, and servants got taxed. The colonists did not like being compared to the lower class people.
On July 4th, 1766, the Stamp Act was repealed. In 1767, the British government imposed new taxes on the colonists called the Townshend Act. They enforced taxes for paper, glass, tea, and paint. The colonists thought the king broke his promise about giving people peace, prosperity, and wealth. After the Townshend Act, tension between the British and colonists rose to a very high level, leading to the repeal of the act. The troops that had been sent to the colonists grew irritant to the Boston. On March 5th, 1770, the colonists formed a mob and released snowballs at the British soldiers, the redcoats. When one accidentally fired his gun, the rest of the soldiers thought that it was time to begin open fire on the people.
In 1773, yet another act was enacted to make money for the losses of the French and Indian War. This act was the Tea Act. The Parliament thought that tea was so important to the colonists that they would pay the tax anyway, but they didn't. The colonists gave them a huge surprise at the Boston Tea Party of 1773. This was considered as one of the most peaceful protests in history, because no one was harmed. The colonists didn't want the Parliament in England to force them to pay taxes, and without having representatives in the Parliament. The Parliament ended the taxes. Then, the Parliament granted a monopoly on tea to the East India Company, and said that colonists could only buy tea from this company. The Parliament thought that tea was so important to the colonists that they would pay tax anyway, but the colonists got mad and dumped the tea into the Boston Harbor.
To teach the colonists a lesson, the Parliament passed laws that became known as the Intolerable Acts in 1774. This act was a punishment for the people of Massachusetts and ended the free and fair elections for the Americans. The Redcoats were sent to Boston to police and end the protests and boycotts. In April 1775, the British, led by General Gage, went to Concord, Massachusetts, to destroy Patriot ammunition supplies. The British marched to Lexington and were confronted by a small Patriot militia force. A shot was fired. No one knows who fired it first, and the British opened fire, killing several Patriots. The British continued to Concord, where they were attacked by a larger group of Patriots under constant ambush. The British force barely made it back to Boston.
This led to the formation of the Continental Congress of September 5th, 1774. The colonists thought it was necessary and together wrote a petition and sent it to London. This petition talked about ending the military force in Boston. The delegates also discussed what seemed like an unavoidable war with Britain. Some of them wanted the war and some didn't. The olive branch petition was sent to Britain to show that the people still wanted to be part of the British kingdom, but be free of the Parliament's control, but it was rejected by the king. In the same year, 56 delegates signed the Declaration of Independence. The 13 colonies were officially the 13 United States. The most important thing about the Congress was 13 colonies were finally working together, and that was vital to America's independence. On the same day, George Washington was nominated to lead the colonist army, the Continental Army. In 1775, Thomas Paine published Common Sense to push collective consciences towards independence. This book showed everyone that anyone can participate in politics. In 1776, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee to draft the Articles of Confederation, a document signed among the 13 colonies that established the United States of America as a confederation of sovereign states and served as its first constitution. Mention a couple of the battles. In 1776, the Battle of Trenton. George Washington commands the Americans in the Battle of Trenton. It was a huge victory for the Americans and really boosts their confidence.
After the Americans won the battles of Saratoga against the British, the French finally decided to become allies with the Americans. In 1781, the last major battle of the American Revolution, the Battle of Yorktown, was fought. To be honest, this battle was a little... who am I kidding? It was super unfair. The Americans and French had a huge advantage over the British. They had knowledge of the land and learned guerrilla warfare, war tactics of the Native Americans. The Americans trapped the British and beat the daylights out of them. The British surrendered, and the Americans won the battle. In 1783, representatives of King George and representatives of the U.S. signed the Treaty of Paris and ended the American Revolution.
In conclusion, Americans ended with more than they bargained for. But they did get what they want, which was no taxation with no representation. Some of the long-term effects lead to the characteristics of the Americans and why they have the laws that they have right now, because they were all made with the shape of the Declaration of Independence. The taxation of America is also different from many countries because of the American special history with tax. The revolution may have made the colonies work together, and that makes the revolution very significant. Present America because without the revolution, the colonies would be living under the British and being taxed. The revolution may have bonded the colonies, however, they are still individually responsible for their own laws, but they all represent the country America. This helped America become the country most famous about its freedom and liberty, and this affected and caused other countries to copy their form of government and also rise up against their monarchy into a democracy. In the end, the Loyalists returned to England and went back to being British, and the Patriots became the Americans, considered one of the most famous countries in the world.